You're listening to the ProcureTech podcast, your weekly show for all that's cooking in the digital procurement space. Yes, we've got the hottest startups, thought leadership, and conversation from visionary industry experts, and definitely no stiff corporate content. I'm your host, James Meads, procurement pro, digital nomad, and ProcureTech fanboy. And now, here's this week's show. Yes, hello there and welcome to another episode of the show. I'm delighted to have you with me today for another great show. And on the ProcureTech podcast, we are all about bringing you content that is fun and innovative of everything out there in the procurement space. We're definitely not going to bring you a show that is dull and boring. So without any further ado, we're going to be carrying on this week with our mini theme of e-sourcing platforms. This is the third in a series of 5 e-sourcing platforms that we're going to help to showcase for you so as you can differentiate between them and understand which one may be the best solution for your business, because no two businesses and no two requirements from a procurement tech best of breed platform are necessarily the same. So on today's episode, what we're going to look at is how an e-sourcing requirement or functionality can be married together with other upstream and downstream areas of functionality, kind of like a hybrid between a best of breed solution and an actual all-in-one suite, and some of the pros and cons of that approach and what it can potentially give you in an organization if you're maybe looking for something that perhaps isn't a sandbox solution that only does e-sourcing and it has a little bit of functionality both on the upstream and the downstream side to complement that. So without any further ado, it's now time to introduce you to this week's guest on the show. So David Wadler of Vendorful, welcome to the ProcureTech podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Good way to start the morning.
And indeed, it is early in the morning for you. So let's jump straight in. What's your background, David? Because when we were chatting previously, you said you'd lived in France before. So tell us a little bit how you came into the space of procurement tech software.
Sure. So there's the how did I get into procurement and what's my background? And those can be different questions. I spent most of my 20s as a professional itinerant. I really did not know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I had a bunch of different jobs. I had a literary agent. I worked in sales. I worked in writing. I was a personal trainer for a spell, although to look at me now, you would never have any idea. I also kind of randomly decided to move to Paris. Did not speak French at the time. I got a job there as a software engineer, learned French and had a wonderful experience. And I was 29. I was back in New York City and working a terrible job. Decided that I hated it and would rather succeed or fail on my own. So I started a software company. I did not know anything about starting a business, but I learned as I went, and I ended up selling it, a few years later to Lexmark, the printer company, which at the time was trying to recast themselves as a software plus hardware play. And literally on the first day, after doing a lot of calls with the press, I got a call from the IT department asking me to review some contracts that they had with a provider of services in a space I knew very, very well. And so I had some domain expertise. They asked me to review the contracts, and I found out we were paying about a 700% premium on these services. And that began the day my procurement journey started. So this got escalated all the way to the CIO, who asked me to meet with him in San Francisco, and sat down with him, and he said, "I'd like you to help clean up a bunch of our IT spend." And I'd been on the other side of this, right, as a provider of services, a vendor, filling out RFPs, responding and trying to win business. And I would complain about it. But what I saw on the other side, and this was specifically on the sourcing side, is the procurement part of it was just far worse. Everything that I complained about as a vendor filling out an RFP was multiplied by the number of stakeholders engaged, the number of vendors engaged, on the buy side. And I complained about it, and then I said, well, I can complain about it, or I can try to fix it. And here we are.
And it's always good when people like you come up with solutions, because the world ultimately becomes a better place because there's more competition and more choice in terms of procurement software. But on that note, Vendorful is not a traditional e-sourcing tool, even though I've included it in this series for simplicity and comparison. You cast a much wider net in terms of the functionality of Vendorful. So can you maybe talk us a little bit through that in terms of the integrated solutions that you have both upstream and downstream as part of Vendorful, and what you see that as a market segment in and of itself?
Sure. So just a little bit of additional context. When we started this business, the idea was actually to build a tool, very, very narrow, specifically for sourcing IT. And we're going to give that tool away for free. So it's RFX for IT, give it away for free, and mine the data and monetize the data. And what we found out was that free is the F word among sourcing professionals. So we would have very, very protracted conversations about our business model, why we make money, how long it'll, how we'll make money, how long it will take us to be able to make money, have enough data, et cetera. And we realized at a certain point we were trying to sell a free product, and that is not a place you want to be. So we put a price tag on it, and then the conversation changed, and people wanted features. We started, meeting those needs, and we changed our approach 180 degrees, and we started a process we call customer-driven development. So we don't build features because we think they're cool. We build features that people ask for because we know with 100% certainty that they're valuable and they'll be used. And this began the evolution of the product from pure e-sourcing, actually from specifically to, pure e-sourcing of IT, to broader e-sourcing, to including these upstream and downstream features. And now what we call ourselves is vendor lifecycle management. We would also happily call it supplier life cycle management, but we're vendorful, not supplierful. So we use the word vendor.
Got to stay on brand, right?
Exactly. So and we use those terms interchangeably. So what we were discovering is that a lot of the processes that we were addressing, from a perspective of sourcing, had been, basically been carried out in email and Excel. And this was true whether or not it was a mid-market company that didn't invest in a third-party, solution. And also in many cases, these were larger organizations which had invested in third-party solutions, and names that our listeners here would know, but found the tools so clunky and cumbersome that it was just easier to do it with Excel, Word, and email. And what we found is that the onboarding process and the data maintenance process and all that stuff also was often being carried out using the same kind of Microsoft Office approach. And we've had to go through this ourselves because we get onboarded, we become a vendor to these companies. And what would happen is they'd say, oh, we need to onboard you. You need to send us tax documentation. You need to send us a certificate of insurance. You need to send us these 4 other documents. And then we're going to send you, a bunch of Excel files, and you're going to have to fill those out. So I asked one of these people, I said, what do you do with this information when we send it back to you? He said, oh, we key it into the ERP. I said, when you say key it into the ERP, do you mean you are manually uploading those documents and you're manually like copying and pasting or retyping the information in? They said, yes. So, well, how do you refresh that data? Oh, we have an Excel document that we maintain. And in the Excel document, we keep track of like when your certificate of insurance is going to expire. I said, this is madness. And we ended up, being very interested in this, had a customer that said, we actually don't run RFPs, but we love your solution. Because they contacted for something else and they said, can we get A? And I said, no, but I can show you B. And B was the RFP management stuff. And they pushed us to build basically the first, vendor management module, first iteration of that. And as we've continued to build this out, we now handle a lot more stuff. So we are, in many cases, the point of onboarding for our customers. Their supply base onboards through Vendorful, and Vendorful will then synchronize that data back to the ERP. And we're actually working on something now where we're going to be basically synchronizing to multiple systems and basically be the traffic cop. So if data changes in any system, it gets synced to Vendorful, and then we push those changes out to the other systems as well, just to make sure everything stays in alignment. We started building a bunch of stuff around tracking performance. So again, this is data that is, maybe stored in the ERP, but is not as accessible as people would like. So the process is pull the data out of the ERP, load it into Tableau or Power BI, build reports, and then email those reports to your boss. And now we can just generate those reports like on the fly. You just go in, you click down, drill down the supplier in question, boom, you see the data, build a report comparing supplier A to B to C, spend data, the ability to tag and track that, contracts, all of those things, can live in Vendorful. So what you'll notice is conspicuously absent is POs, requisitions, and those things. And we think that the P2P market is pretty robust at this point. So we will often be brought in next to an ERP or next to a P2P system to basically address the gaps or the functionality that don't do quite as well as we do. But we are certainly not looking to rip and replace those. We want to drive more value and more return on the existing investment there.
So, I mean, you've kind of answered then what my next question was going to be, which is why wouldn't a potential customer go out and buy an enterprise level source to contract suite that have been out on the market for years and years as opposed to Vendorful? So, I mean, I guess if you're not covering the more sort of transactional P2P cycle, I suspect there must be a pretty big price difference between your offering and what, let's call them, the first generation source to contract suites are offering, which, let's face it, they have their pros, they have their cons, but they're aimed more at enterprise level clients, right?
Yep, you're 100% correct. So, and we do have enterprise level clients, but as I mentioned, we are not a standalone solution there, and so we're an augmentation. As you go down market a bit, it's sort of the lower mid market, we might be the only tool that they have from an e-procurement perspective. But you are also 100% correct on pricing. The kind of fat part under the curve for us is about $50,000 to $150,000, per year US. And most of these other tools, particularly when you sell them to enterprises, are millions of dollars. The other big difference for us is we've made well under 1% of our revenue on professional services. And the reason is we do what we call, again, customer-driven development. So what that means is we are constantly improving the product. We typically do about 2 to 3 releases per week based on customer feedback. We don't charge for those features. The only time we've ever charged for features was with a top 20 global bank who said, we have some very, very specific things that we need. And we knew we were not going to be able to sell those new features to other customers. So it was really one-off development, and we charge them. But outside of that, we have never charged for development. We do not charge for implementation and deployment. If you signed a contract with me now, James, you would have an account in 5 to 10 seconds, and I would show you how to use the system, and you would be getting value in 30 to 60 minutes. Right? So it's a whole different sales cycle. It's a whole different price point, and it's a whole different user experience. What we're really doing is delivering something that feels like consumer software, right, to the enterprise. And one of our quote unquote competitors, these big enterprise things, they're not really competitors, looked at my product and said, "Oh my God, you guys have built like Google Docs for procurement." I'm like,
Okay.
that's I'll take it. Yeah, that's much more the experience.
So, just a quick interlude because there are a couple of things that I really want to make you aware of because I think they will be valuable for you. So, number one, we now have a monthly newsletter where we bring you curated content of everything that's happening in the digital procurement space. If you want to get that, just head to procuretechpodcast.com/newsletter, enter your name and email, and we'll get that delivered straight to your inbox. Number two, if you're a head of procurement or a center of excellence leader and you're perhaps a little bit confused or overwhelmed with what's out there as best of breed digital procurement technology, especially if you're a mid-sized business, schedule a call with me. There's a link at the bottom of the show notes in this episode. Just hit that schedule a call link and we can have a quick chat to understand your challenges and what potential solutions out there may be suitable for your organization. And now let's get right back to this week's show. If these sort of traditional enterprise level source to contract suites, I mean, I've seen it in my own eyes in terms of LinkedIn, they're starting to position themselves now more towards going after the mid-market. What would, other than price, what would differentiate yourselves from them? Because if they have the marketing budget and the brand behind them, there's the risk, isn't there, that they could eat you for breakfast if they're going after your typical market segment?
Sure. So I think that there's a few ways we win. One way we win is we're a new product. So we don't have years and years and years of like enterprise debt. And what I mean by debt is not financial debt. I mean technical debt. And so we're built on top of a modern framework. It's all natively collaborative. There's built-in, for example, video conferencing. You can click a single button. You don't have to go and set up your Zoom or your Teams or your whatever, your WebEx. We have chat in the app. Chat was one of the first features we added because we have all this natural native real-time capability, and we added a button that said video chat. The entire user experience, as I said, feels like consumer software. And so from the perspective of adoption, again, when we are going into an enterprise and sitting side by side by, source to contract suite, invariably that source to contract suite is going to have an RFP module. I will keep specific names out of this, but we had a Fortune 500 retailer contact us with an unsolicited RFP. It was very large, and we pushed through it. We submitted it, and we made it to the finals. We ultimately ended up winning the business. But when we went for the site visit, this is pre-COVID, they said, "Well, you know that we use X. We're one of the largest X deployments in North America." I said, "Well, why would you use us?" They said, "You can't do in their system what you can do in yours." They said it's, they call it an RFP module, but it's a quoting tool, and it doesn't allow us to do the sort of the strategic, complex spend that we need to do. So the two things are, number one, no enterprise cruft, which basically means that we deliver a better user experience. It's just easier to use our product. You don't need a PhD. You don't need tons of training. You don't need 6 months to onboard. Our pricing model is also different. We don't charge by seat, which also encourages, broader adoption. The last thing is we don't claim to do 65 different things. We do like 5 or 6 different things. And that allows us to do those things very, very well. If we were going to be broad rather than deep, we would actually just start to look like those other companies. So we have some lines that we've drawn about what we will and we won't do. Like we're never we have a contract repository with some metadata management, et cetera. We're never going to be iCertis. iCertis is an amazing contracts product, right? And they have competitors that have amazing contracts products. But the stuff that we do really, really well. And RFPs is part of that. Onboarding is part of that. Supplier performance is part of that.
So why wouldn't a customer then go out and buy an e-sourcing suite and a contract management suite and a spend analytics suite and an SRM suite as separate sort of best of breed tools? What's the obvious downside in doing that?
We do think the market is moving more towards best of breed, but we like to think in terms of a mini suite. I know that because I have to I'm a buyer of technology. I'm a buyer of other services all the time, and have been, throughout my startup career, especially as we started to scale and people became interested in the dollars that we're going to spend. I don't want to have, what we would call, like, 10 throats to choke, right? I want to have, very, very good software. But I don't want to necessarily have 10 things that I need to integrate. If I can have two or maybe three, that is a much more palatable solution for me. So, we think, frankly, our view on and there are going to be companies and probably people you've interviewed who disagree. We thought that ERFX was too narrow for us to really build a very large business. Similarly, we thought building, sort of the next Ariba was going to be too broad in the current market landscape where people are doing, the best of breed. So we look at Vendorful as sort of like a Goldilocks solution, right? It's not too narrow. It's not a point solution, but it is not an exhaustive, expansive suite where it just becomes very difficult to do everything really well. So that's our view, is that we will be in that kind of best of breed approach, but that they're probably going to work with two, maybe three providers of service as opposed to 10.
And David, I don't think that's an unreasonable assumption, because I'm doing 5 of these interviews as part of a mini series of e-sourcing platforms, and while acknowledging that's not only what you do, as you've explained, as being part of a mini suite, none of these guys, when I've spoken to them, and they've obviously asked me the question, hey, who else are you speaking to? None of them have seen the others as being direct competitors. And it just goes to show how broad the space is, for one, and two, how you and the others don't necessarily see each other as competitors. Rather, you're seeing, email and Microsoft Excel as being the competitors. And if that is the case, there's a very big market segment to go after.
There's trillions of dollars of global spend, and again, most of that, I don't know, by transaction or purchase decision or whatever, or by total dollar amount, perhaps both. A huge percentage of it, at the very least, is managed using the tools you just described, right? Which are not fit for purpose. I one time somebody asked me, well, can I just continue to use Excel? I said, you could. You can also, use a screwdriver or hammer in nails. It'll work. It's just going to take a long time. And time is the one thing people can't get back. And the other thing is there are hard dollar savings that happen when you start to recover time, because when you recover time, you have more. You've now shifted what you're doing with your time from, like, very tactical things like copying and pasting things into or from an Excel document, into actually evaluating the data and evaluating the landscape and evaluating your spend, so you can have more competitive sourcing situations, so you can implement corrective action plans, actually, not just and actions when you see underperformance from a supplier. So all of this kind of, I'm going to save a penny stuff, because I'm going to continue to just do it in Excel. It really doesn't make sense. But yes, back to your point, one of the reasons we love this market is it's boundless and growing. It's like the universe. It's already infinite, but it's expanding in every direction.
It's certainly expanding in every direction. I've got a database of procurement tech companies that I keep, mainly for personal reasons, although I'm looking to expand that and build that into something that adds value to the wider community. But I am literally updating it every single week. The obvious next question would be that if you've built this mini suite around this vendor lifecycle management concept, do you not run the risk then of being too specific? I mean, do you not have someone that comes to you and says, hey, I want an e-sourcing tool that has P2P as a feature?
Over time, I don't know where our customers will take us in terms of requirements, and it is certainly quite possible. It is also quite possible that we proactively build out relationships with companies that do P2P, where we are very complementary. There's one, they'll remain nameless, who has brought us into a few deals because they said, you know, basically the opposite, that they were working with some prospects. Those prospects did not have sourcing, did not have any sort of supply management, did not have any sort of performance management for their suppliers. And they said, we were basically looked at as too narrow, so we'd like to go and approach the deal with you. So yeah, look, over time, I think there's a possibility that we build it. There's also a very strong possibility that we have a bunch of turnkey integrations, and you put in your API key and check the box, and now it's Vendorful plus X right out of the box. And rather than shoving like our P2P down your throat, we basically just say, look, here's a Lego kit. Now you could take Vendorful plus X, or you can take Vendorful plus Y, or Vendorful plus Z. And I said Z for you instead of Z.
I was going to say.
I don't know where your audience is, but if you have a UK bias, they need to understand me. So yeah, so that's and that's kind of the way we look at it. The world of web services and APIs has really made this a wonderful experience for the buyer of these tools, because you have so many more choices. The downside is paradox of choice, right? You said you have this expansive and growing thing, and then the number of permutations and combinations that you can address from an integration perspective is getting bigger too.
So on that note, if anyone would like to learn a little bit more about what it can do and its specific functionality, where is the best place for people to find you or get hold of you?
Yeah, they can email me directly, and I will respond. I am david@vendorful.com, so first name at companyname.com. They can also go to the website, which is vendorful.com. And Vendorful is, yes, it's a spoof on wonderful. If we were German, it would have been named Venderbar, like spoof on Wunderbar, which actually was considered. But yeah, VENDORFUL.com.
And I will link to that as well in the show notes. Dave, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Sorry to get you up early in the morning there in New York City. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for being a guest.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a fun way to start the day.
So that wraps up another great episode of the ProcureTech podcast. Join us again next week, where we will be continuing our little mini series on e-sourcing software. Until then, if you like what you hear on the ProcureTech podcast, please go and subscribe to us in your favorite place where you listen to your podcasts, or leave us a review on Apple if you're an iOS user. It helps us get seen by more people. Also, we have a LinkedIn page where we post regular snippets and best of bits from previous episodes. So if you just want to get a quick, short snippet of something interesting, we post regular content on there too. Just head over and follow us, or why not connect with me at the same time? I would love to hear who you would want me to get on the podcast as perhaps a future guest. Until then, take care of yourselves wherever you are in the world. Until next time, bye for now.